Good morning and welcome to First Parish Brewster. We are a Unitarian Universalist welcoming congregation of people of diverse philosophies and beliefs, people of various cultures and races, sexual orientations, gender identities, abilities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your path, may this be a place of rest and restoration on your journey. Our chalice lighting this morning is Blessing in the Chaos by Jan Richardson. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you find the peace you did not think possible and see what shimmers within the storm. Next, we have a reading from John Lewis. He tells this story in the prelude to his memoir, Walking with the Wind, and I thought it best this morning to hear it from him himself. There is a glitch at the end of the video that is part of the video, but I invite you to be open to this reading and to his words.
My Aunt Geneva lived in a shotgun house. She didn't have a green manicured lawn. She had a simple, plain dirt yard. Sometime at night, you can look up through the ceiling. Through the tin roof of this old house, you can count the stars. When it would rain, she would get a pail of what we call a bucket and catch the rainwater. My Aunt Geneva lived in a shotgun house. For those of you who are so young, for those of you who've grown up and lived in New York and Boston and Philadelphia and Memphis and other big cities, let me tell you what a shotgun house is. In the nonviolent sense, a shotgun house is an old house with a tin roof where you can bounce the ball through the front door and the ball will go straight out the back door. My Aunt Geneva lived in a shotgun house. From time to time, she would go out into the woods and take branches from a dogwood tree. And she would make a broom. And she called this broom the brush broom. And she would sweep this dirt yard very clean, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. But one Saturday afternoon, a group of my sisters and brothers and a few of my fresh cousins, about 12 or 15 of us young children, were playing in her dirt yard, and an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing, and the rain started beating on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. My aunt became terrified. She started crying. She thought this old house was going to blow away. The wind continued to blow. The thunder continued to roll. The lightning continued to flash. She got us all on the inside. She told us to hold hands. When one corner of this old house appeared to be lifting from its foundation, she'd had us to walk to that corner to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. When the other corner appeared to be lifted, she had us to walk to that corner to try to hold this house down with our little bodies. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never, ever left the house. For many years, all of us, black and white, young and old, men and women, Protestant, Catholic, and Jew, all of us have been trying to hold this house we call America together. The rain may beat on an old house, call it the house of Memphis, call it the house of Tennessee, the house of Georgia, the house of New York, call it the American house, call it the world house. We must never, ever leave the house. We must build one house. We must build one family. We must build a house that is strong enough for all of us as we face history, as we face ourselves. Walk with the wind and let the spirit of history be our guide.
Now is the time in the service where we collect for our offertory. Each week we have the practice of splitting our offertory plate Half of the collection goes to the work of First Parish Brewster, and half goes to a worthy organization. This week, the worthy organization is Pause a While. Pause a While's sole purpose is to provide a dedicated and warm environment to host 12-step recovery meetings. In non-pandemic times, they had an average of 4 meetings held at the facility each day, with close to 200 individuals attending these meetings. The Pause a While is one of the largest dedicated facilities of its type in Massachusetts. There are also meetings held there which provide support to families and loved ones of alcoholics and addicts, including meetings for children affected by a parent's addiction or alcoholism. Places like this are important now more than ever and will continue to be important after this pandemic. Today, we ask you to give generously if you are able. There are several ways you can give. You can text to give. The number will be posted in the chat box. You can mail a check to First Parish Brewster, making it out to First Parish Brewster, indicating it is for the split plate and today's date. Or you can go to our website and donate there as well. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for supporting this worthy organization. The offertory will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. Now is the time in the service where we will name people who have died in the last year. Each year we have this practice of naming, but normally in non-pandemic times, we are in our sanctuary. We have a beautiful ritual of lighting candles. I'm sorry we can't be there together. This year, several of you RSVP'd in advance to name your beloveds during the service. I will begin by naming a couple of names that were sent to me in advance. Then we will go to your time of naming, and after that, we will have a musical offering from our guest musician, Maria Rindinello Parker. And during that time, you are invited to type people's names in the chat box, but please wait to do that until that portion, until we are listening to that music. There has been so much grief this year. More grief than any other year, in part due to this pandemic. I invite you to enter this time with reverence and presence as we honor these names that are spoken, as we honor these lives that we lost last year. To begin, I will name that as of yesterday, 369,000 people have died from COVID-19 in the US alone. This number is hard to wrap our minds around, but it represents parents, siblings, children, friends, and beloveds. After each name, let's just take a moment and breathe together. I name this morning Sharon Durham from Atlanta, Georgia, who is Mary Wallace's longtime friend who died unexpectedly on New Year's Eve. Additionally, Mary Wallace's good friend Anita's brother, Cappy Dominic, who died on December the 9th. Antonio Bassick, who is Christina Johnson's grandfather, passed away at the age of 102 on December the 8th. And now it is time for your naming. To begin, we will hear from Roseanne Shapiro, followed by Patricia Tun.
I light this candle for Joanne Harrington, dedicated teacher, member of the Insight Meditation Sangha and the Food Forest Initiative. A bright light extinguished too soon.
Thank you, Roseanne.
I'd like to remember David Edwin Bugby, my brother. He was deaf, and all of those who live with deafness and hearing impairment.
Thank you, Patty. Let's take a breath together. Next, we have Sharon Stover Gleason, followed by Susan Winslow. Oh, not Pat Stover. Bear with us here. Please make sure your names are correct on the screen. I'm just looking so that we can find you. I'm not seeing Sharon. If you are here, if you can just send a message to Maggie, we'll move on. Sharon, if you're here, if you can send a message to Maggie so we know which one is your name, that would be great. And we'll move on to Susan Winslow. Susan, we just need you to, oh, there you go, perfect.
We light this candle for our beloved daughter, Lily Arlene Anderson, who left us October 4th after a brave battle with a very aggressive form of ALS. She had just turned 21 on August 31st. And her sisters and aunts and uncles and grandparents who she's with now, we all just treasured her and send peace and love her way. She gave us nothing but unconditional love, which we pray for this world now. Love you, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Your audio went out a little bit, but that was your daughter, Lily, who died of ovarian cancer. I think you said on December 4th. Here, let me see if I can unmute you again. There you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yes. October 4th. And
October 4th.
ALS, an aggressive form of ALS.
Okay, sorry. Apologies. Your audio went out a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Let's just breathe together. Next, we have Reese Brewer, followed by Carol Roman.
Remembering my daughter, Camilla Metter Brewer, and my father, James Reese Brewer, Jr.
Thank you, Reese. And Pam. Let's just breathe together. And Carol Roman.
We are here for my mom, Irma Gonzalez. Irma is Esther Gonzalez, my biggest cheerleader in life, who died of heart complications in March. We love you. We miss you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Jo Jolette, followed by Melissa Fisher.
I'm remembering my brother, my older brother, Ricky, who passed away September 11th after a long, long battle with alcoholism. I miss him dearly. He was my Irish twin.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Let's all breathe together. And next we have Melissa Fisher. Bear with us a moment. We're just looking through the names. Let's just breathe together. I'm not seeing Melissa or Sharon Stover Gleason. I know Melissa was here earlier. So they sent in their names in advance, so I will read those now. Sharon wanted me to read the name of Joanne Demers, a very wonderful and kind-hearted friend. Oh, and I think I skipped Laura Gill. Laura will come back to you. Apologies. And for Melissa, she would like to name her cousin's son who took his life around Easter 2020. He was in his mid-20s. His name was Brandon Wilkie. So we name him as well. Let's go to Laura Gill, which might be on Marie's. I can't see your camera, Laura, but I'm going to unmute you, Marie, and guess you're together.
I didn't understand.
Hi, this is Marie Hartley, and I was just putting in a prayer for Sam Biondi, Bev Biondi's father, who died in the fall, and also his wife, Mary Biondi, who died almost a year prior. Mary was a member of the church.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. And I'm not seeing, Carol Gorman also wanted to name her husband, Rob, who died at the end of 2019. She said she wasn't able to do it at the service we had a year ago, so she just wanted to name his name this morning. Thank you for naming these names. We hold their memories sacred in our hearts. Now we will enter a time of naming in the chat box while we will hear the music of Maria Rindinello Parker. So you are invited to type the names of people you have lost in the chat box. Thank you for naming these names in the chat box and on camera. We hold them in our hearts. We hold the legacy that they left. Let's take a breath together. Each year, we hold this service honoring people who have died in the last year. Thank you for naming and bearing witness to each other as we hold these griefs. And this week, there is an additional level of grief with the events in the Capitol last Wednesday. During this pandemic, we have been tasked with carrying what it means to live in the midst of trauma, the trauma of our democracy under threat, and the trauma of moving through a pandemic. For many, we held our breath just to make it through the election, just to make it to January 20th. And this last week might have made it hard for many of you to breathe. The images were so shocking, so unbelievable, and the news and stories that have come out of the events of Wednesday are still so hard to wrap our minds around. This was a trauma to all of us, to all watching horrified, and to the people working within the Capitol, many of whom had to return right to work, to that place of trauma, to move our democracy forward. On Wednesday, I was driving home with my father after just having spent several days hiking around Zion National Park. He told me as he was driving to check the news that he heard there might be a rally of white supremacists in DC that afternoon. Upon checking the news, I was in shock. I couldn't believe that this was happening. Even though I preached about a possible coup the week before the election, I still couldn't believe it. Family members called and texted, horrified that this was occurring. And ever since, my body has been on alert. I've had trouble sleeping, trouble processing what has occurred, and the 5 deaths that happened as a result of it. I've had trouble reconciling this in my mind, in my heart, and in my body. Maybe you have had trouble with this too. I hear many people saying, this is not who we are as a nation, but this is exactly who we are. We are a nation that was founded on the premise of white supremacy, and white supremacy manifests as violence, manifests as privilege, walking into the Capitol, and this week it manifested as an assault on our very democracy. This is who we are, but this isn't who we have to be in the future. And to look towards that future, we can reflect on 2 of the people we lost last year, John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. John Lewis, as many of you know, spent his life as a champion for civil rights. He could have easily said no. I mean, it may not have been easy for him, but he could have said, I don't have the emotional labor for this at any point in his life, but he didn't. He was a freedom rider in the 1960s. He marched with Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington, and he served as a member of the US House of Representatives for Georgia for almost 40 years. His passion was voting rights. He said that the vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in democracy. He died last summer at the age of 80, but right up until his death, he was using his voice. Sorry, my light just went out. He was using his voice to speak truth to power, to try to move this country towards that vision of beloved community that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of. He believed that nothing, this is a quote from him, nothing can stop the power of a committed and determined people to make a difference in our society. He continued, why? Because human beings are the most dynamic link to the divine on this planet. I'm going to repeat that quote because it's so good. Nothing can stop the power of a committed and determined people to make a difference in our society. Why? Because human beings are the most dynamic link to the divine on this planet. This week, when you might have felt hopeless, when you might have felt that the world was out of control and what can we do? Remember his words. Remember that we are a link to the divine. Remember that we can still make a difference. We are still needed, and apathy will get us nowhere. Though we may feel isolated wherever we are, and like we can't commit to action, there are always choices that we can make. So I want to show you, hold on one second. There was a tweet on Twitter from Danielle Koch, and I want to show it to you now here. Let me go into, okay. So Danielle Koch talks about the cycle of inaction. She says a horrific injustice occurs. We enter into shock and confusion. We have an emotional response. And then we go to this place called performative allyship. And I'm just going to pause this for a moment and talk a little bit about performative allyship. Some of you might wonder what this term means. Holiday Phillips writes that to understand performative allyship, let's first look at what real allyship is. An ally is someone from a non-marginalized group who uses their privilege to advocate for a marginalized group. They transfer the benefits of their privilege to those who lack it. Performative allyship, on the other hand, is when someone from that same non-marginalized group professes support and solidarity with a marginalized group in a way that either isn't helpful or actively harms that group. Performative allyship usually involves the ally receiving some kind of reward. On social media, it's that virtual pat on the back for being a good person or on the right side. So it could be expressing outrage on social media about another person of color killed by the police, and yet not actually engaging with the work the other 364 days of the year. If you have more questions about this term, I encourage you to do some further research on it, but I just wanted to give you a little definition of it so that you didn't get stuck on it. So she talks about, we have this horrific injustice occurring. We have shock and confusion. We have an emotional response, performative allyship, which leads to guilt and fatigue, which leads to inaction and passivity, and then apathy, and the cycle starts all over again. So then she fixed it and made it the cycle of action. She says, so when horrific injustice takes place, we won't be overtaken by shock and confusion, as if the fruit of systemic oppression is surprising. Instead, our emotional response will be marked by empathy and compassion, leading to a rejection of performative allyship in exchange for the real, vigorous work. And should guilt and fatigue try to settle in, we'll recenter the needs of those yearning for liberation, remembering that inaction and passivity are detrimental to justice, and that apathy is the antithesis of unconditional love. Apathy is the antithesis of unconditional love. This is the cycle of action. This is what John Lewis was calling us to, and what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg called us to as well. No matter what your age, each of these people championed for this vision in their 80s. Many of you know Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg served on the Supreme Court for 27 years and fought for women's rights her whole life. She worked to uphold our democracy until her dying breath at the age of 87. She said, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And she modeled that through her whole life. When she reflected on her legacy, she said, I would like to be remembered as someone who used whatever talent she had to do her work to the very best of her ability. She had integrity and a deep commitment to ethics. Her guiding ethos was a quest for equality and for justice. Quite often when I preach social justice sermons in our sanctuary, at least one person will say to me in the receiving line, I did this work, and now it's time for your generation to pick it up. But John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg say it should never be set down, that we all have work to do until our time on this earth is done. This service today honors people who have died in the past year, and this invites us into reflecting on what our legacy will be. What will we tell our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren about what we did when our democracy was under attack? About what we did when white supremacy showed itself yet again. This is our invitation today, to reflect on where we are called to this work and what we are called to do. For many, they think this means they have to be in the streets protesting, and that is not the only way to help build the beloved community. You helped build the beloved community when you sent 14,220 letters and postcards to get out the vote. 14,220. You exhibit this when you show up for book groups and beloved conversations trainings and eighth principle work and reparations work. If you are in leadership and you are engaging with Widening the Circle, the report from the Commission on Institutional Change, you are engaging in this work. Everyone has a place in this work. Everyone has a place in leaving this as a part of their legacy. Long after we are gone, when this moment is just a moment in history books that people read about, may our legacy be that we did not sit idly by and watch in horror. May our legacy be that we still continue to show up, to not give in to apathy, and to do this work that matters. And to remember that it's not on any one person's shoulders, it's on all of our shoulders. It is all of our responsibility, and we are in this together. Dear ones, I am tired. I'm guessing that many of you are tired. We need moments of rest and restoration in the midst of such trauma, but do not let your fatigue send you into apathy. You are needed. We are needed. Remember this and take space to process all that has occurred. Take space to remember that we are all representations of the divine and beloved. You are not alone, dear ones. We are in this together today and in the days ahead, and we can give thanks for the legacies of people like John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who showed us what a life of service really meant. May we honor their legacy with the way we live our lives. May we, connected to each other, walk with the wind as John Lewis called us to. Move to the corner of the house that is the weakest, that needs our strength, and remember that we are in this together. Amen. You're invited to join in our closing hymn, You Do Not Walk Alone, sung by our choir.
Gentle sea
Thank you to our choir. I now invite you to, if you are on a computer or a desktop, to put it in gallery view so that you can look at everyone on the screen. If you're on an iPad or a phone, you can swipe through the pictures. Just want you to take a look at everyone who's here this morning. Look at all these beautiful faces. As you are looking, I will read our benediction offered from Reverend Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone.